What is up, family? We have another Patreon request. We got 732 AD. I was really young back then. We got the clash that changed Europe forever. Forever. Why was this battle so important? Well, because it changed Europe forever, I would imagine. Anyway, what is the saga of battles? Okay.
There are battles that decide kings, and there are battles that decide empires. But once in 1,000 years, there comes a battle that decides the future of a whole civilization.
Looks like a game.
In the year 732, a storm rode north, a force that had already conquered half the known world.
732.
Kingdoms had fallen, cities burned, and it seemed nothing could stop them. Yet on the edge of Europe, a single army stood in their path. Outnumbered, outmatched, but unbroken. Their leader was no emperor, no crowned monarch, only a man known as the Hammer.
You think that's where the game Warhammer came from?
What happened next would echo for centuries, shaping the destiny of an entire continent, and perhaps the world itself.
The Battle of
The early 8th century was an age of unstoppable momentum for the Umayyad Caliphate. In less than a century, Islam had spread from the deserts of Arabia across North Africa into Spain, and now pressed into the heart of Europe. Cities fell like dominoes, and entire kingdoms collapsed before the tide. For many, it seemed inevitable. The crescent would soon overshadow the cross. By 711, Muslim armies had crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and swept through the Iberian Peninsula with breathtaking speed. In just a few years, the Visigothic kingdom of Spain was no more. The conquerors brought with them not only armies, but also new culture, administration, and faith.
Yep.
To the north, however, lay the lands of the Franks, tribes and kingdoms fragmented, struggling for identity, but standing in the path of further expansion. At this time, Europe was far from the continent we imagine today. There was no unified France, no mighty Germany, no powerful England. Instead, scattered territories fought for survival against one another as much as against outside invaders. And among them rose a man who would soon earn his place in history. Charles Martel, the illegitimate son of a Frankish nobleman. Charles had not inherited power easily. Born out of wedlock, his claim to leadership was shaky, and rivals circled like wolves. Yet through cunning, political maneuvering, and sheer military ability, he began to forge a reputation. He was called Martel, the Hammer, not because of wealth or birth, but because of his relentless force on the battlefield. When word reached him that a massive Umayyad force under the general Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi had crossed the Pyrenees and was burning its way through southern France, Charles knew the stakes. This was not merely a raid for plunder. This was an invasion that could change the face of Europe forever. The Umayyads moved quickly. They captured Bordeaux, ravaged Aquitaine, and left a trail of fear in their wake. Monasteries were looted, villages destroyed, nobles slaughtered. Panic spread across the countryside. Many wondered if God himself had abandoned Christendom. But Charles did not panic. He began rallying warriors from across his realm. Frankish veterans hardened in tribal warfare, peasants pressed into service, and loyal nobles who believed in his cause. He did not have the numbers to match Abdul Rahman's vast host, but he had something more important: discipline and strategy. By autumn
I thought he was going to say machine guns. Oh yeah, wrong era.
of 732, Charles had gathered his men near Tours, a city that symbolized Christian learning and faith. He chose his ground carefully. Unlike his enemies, Charles understood that cavalry, fast, mobile, devastating, could be blunted if forced to fight on unfavorable terrain. He positioned his army on a high wooded hill where the Muslim horsemen would find no easy charge. His infantry locked their shields, braced their spears, and waited. The stage was set. The fate of Europe would soon hang in the balance, not in the halls of kings or the prayers of monks, but on a battlefield where two worlds collided. For several tense days in the autumn of 732, two armies stared at one another across the cold French countryside. The Umayyad force, numbering perhaps 40,000 or more, stretched across the open fields. Their banners shimmered in the wind.
Seems like a lot more than 40,000, right?
Their cavalry restless, horses stamping and snorting with impatience. They had swept through Iberia with ease and crushed every foe in their path. To many of them, these Franks were simply the next victims. But Charles Martel's men were not like the disorganized war bands the Muslims had encountered before. They stood in tight ranks on the high ground, shield locked to shield, spear tips glinting in the pale autumn sun. They were not professional soldiers in the Roman sense, nor knights in shining armor, as later centuries would imagine. But they had one crucial advantage. Charles had drilled them to fight as a disciplined unit. They would not break easily. The two armies camped within sight of each other. At night, the fields glowed with thousands of campfires. Men prayed, sharpened their blades, whispered of their families far away.
Is it not insane how war used to be compared to how it is today? It's unbelievable, the difference. I just can't even imagine. I can't imagine these kind of wars right here.
Some trembled, fearing the tide of battle. Others burned with conviction that this was the hour when Christendom itself was on trial. Abdul Rahman, the Muslim commander, faced a dilemma. He knew his cavalry was his greatest weapon. Light, fast, and deadly, they had shattered Visigothic lines in Spain and routed countless enemies. But Charles had chosen his ground so carefully that the terrain offered little room for a devastating charge. To throw his horsemen recklessly at the Frankish shield wall could mean disaster. So for days, Abdul Rahman hesitated, probing, waiting for Charles to descend into the plains where cavalry could dominate.
Nope.
Charles, however, refused to move.
Of course.
He knew that patience was his strongest ally. Every day that passed allowed more of his reinforcements to trickle in, swelling his numbers. He built his confidence not on flashy maneuvers, but on the steady courage of men who understood they were fighting for their homes, their faith, and their very survival. The standoff could not last forever. Tension mounted with each passing dawn. Scouts from both sides clashed in skirmishes on the edges of the battlefield. Rumors spread that the Umayyads planned to march north toward Tours itself, to sack the holy city and break the morale of all Christendom. Charles could not allow it. Finally, Abdul Rahman made his decision. He could not wait indefinitely, for his men grew restless and supplies dwindled. He ordered his cavalry forward, preparing to unleash the thunderous power that had carried Islam across continents. As the sun rose on that fateful morning, the air was filled with the sound of hooves pounding the earth. Lines of armored riders formed, banners snapping above them, their curved swords catching the light. They shouted praises to God, confident that victory was inevitable.
God or Allah? Just saying. According to them, it's two different people. Two different gods.
On the hill, the Franks tightened their formation. Shields overlapped, spears angled forward like the quills of a hedgehog. Behind them, Charles Martel rode along the line, his voice carrying over the din. "Hold your ground," he commanded. "Do not break ranks. Stand firm. And today we fight not just for ourselves, but for all of Europe." The moment had come. The clash of civilizations was about to erupt, and the fate of the continent would be decided not by kings or diplomats, but by the courage of men in steel and leather standing shoulder to shoulder against the storm. The silence before the storm did not last long.
It'll be a hell of a battle.
As the Muslim cavalry surged forward, the ground trembled beneath their charge. Thousands of hooves pounded the earth in rhythm, a sound like thunder rolling across the plains. Dust rose in great clouds, banners snapped in the wind, and the air filled with the roar of men shouting, their voices carried on the crisp autumn air. From a distance, it must have seemed unstoppable. Wave after wave of armored riders driving straight at the Frankish line. Swords flashed, lances leveled, and the sheer momentum of the charge promised to crush anything in its path. This was the weapon that had carried Islam from Arabia to Spain, sweeping aside kingdoms as though they were nothing. But on the hill, Charles Martel's men held their ground. They tightened their formation, shields pressed so close that not a crack showed between them. Spears bristled outward, forming a living wall of wood and iron. The Frankish infantry had no horses, no mobility.
They didn't even have a horse? I could have swore I saw horses. Not one horse.
But they had something else. The determination to stand or die where they fought.
And a hammer.
The first collision was earth-shaking. The Umayyad riders smashed into the shield wall with brutal force, the clash of iron against wood echoing like cannon fire. Horses reared and screamed as they impaled themselves on...
See, that's terrible. I feel bad. The only people I feel bad... The only things I feel bad for are the damn horses. They didn't ask to be in this shit. You know what I mean? You know how many horses died because... Anyway, whatever. That's us. We do things like that.
The forest of spears. Riders swung curved swords downward, hacking at helmets and shoulders, but the Frankish shields absorbed the blows. For a moment the line buckled. Men staggered, some fell. Shields splintered under the relentless assault. But Charles had drilled his warriors well. Gaps closed quickly, fallen shields replaced by the men behind. The line bent, but it did not break. Frustrated, the Muslim cavalry pulled back and charged again, hoping to smash through by sheer weight. Again, the shield wall held. Each time the riders advanced, they were met with the same wall of spears and unyielding determination. What should have been a swift rout became a grinding struggle. As horsemen fell, their bodies tangled in the spears, their mounts collapsing in agony. The battlefield descended into chaos. Screams of men and animals mingled with the metallic clash of weapons. Dust choked the air. Frankish infantry, though battered, began to push back with short swords and axes, striking at the fallen riders who had been thrown into their ranks.
Nice.
Blood ran down the slope, soaking into the autumn leaves.
Oh.
Charles Martel himself rode behind the lines, shouting encouragement.
Oh, there's your horse. See, they had one horse.
He reminded his men that every moment they held meant salvation for their families, their homes, their faith. "Stand firm," he cried again and again. His voice carried like the hammer that was his name, pounding courage into hearts that might otherwise have faltered. Still, the Umayyads did not retreat. Abdul Rahman hurled wave after wave of cavalry against the hill. Each time they expected the Franks to collapse.
Oh.
Each time the shield wall absorbed the shock.
Huh.
Hours passed in this brutal rhythm. Charge, clash, withdraw, and charge again. By midday, the field was littered with corpses. Dead horses sprawled across the grass, their riders crushed beneath them.
Terrible.
The Frankish ranks were bloodied and exhausted, but they remained unbroken. What had begun as a confident assault by the Umayyads was turning into a test of endurance neither side had expected. And as the sun dipped lower, the tide of battle began to shift in a way that Abdul Rahman had not foreseen. By late afternoon, the battle had reached a grinding stalemate. The Muslim cavalry continued their furious charges, but the Frankish shield wall stood like a cliff against the tide. Both armies were exhausted, bloodied, and gasping for breath. The cold autumn air reeked of sweat, steel, and death. It was then that fate intervened, not with the swing of a sword, but with a rumor. Somewhere on the battlefield's edge, word began to spread among the Umayyad ranks that their camp, far behind the lines, was under attack. The baggage train, heavy with loot and supplies, was said to be in danger. For soldiers who had marched across continents, that treasure was more than spoils. It was their reward, their wealth, their future.
Yeah.
Panic rippled through the cavalry ranks. Some riders broke away, turning their horses toward the rear. Others hesitated, torn between loyalty to their commander and the instinct to protect what was theirs. In the chaos of battle, even whispers could become a flood.
Excuse me. I had a feeling it would become a numbers game. 40,000, 20,000 run away, out of just pure fear that they're not going to win the war, that they're watching all their comrades die one after the other. But yeah, that helps too if you know that, oh, wait a minute, all of our stuff is being stolen while we're fighting here. So now your mind is in two different places. It couldn't have been just them with a wall on a hill. You know what I mean? Holding back 40,000. It had to be something else. So there you go. That's the something else. I got it.
And soon the discipline of the Umayyad host began to unravel. Charles Martel saw it. From his position on the hill, he noticed the hesitation, the disorder creeping into the enemy lines. His hammer was not only forged in steel, but in timing, and he struck now. He ordered his men to press forward, spears and axes driving into the gaps left by the wavering cavalry.
Nice.
The Frankish infantry, exhausted though they were, surged with new energy. They had held all day against wave after wave, and now at last they sensed the enemy faltering. Shouts of triumph rose above the clash of steel as the Franks counterattacked, driving their foes down the slope in brutal hand-to-hand combat.
Nice.
Abdul Rahman desperately tried to regain control. He rode among his men, urging them to hold fast, to remember their faith, to stand against the Franks. His presence was commanding, his voice carried over the din, but the tide was shifting against him. More and more of his soldiers turned back toward the camp, leaving the front line exposed. What had begun as a confident assault was dissolving into confusion. The Umayyads, for the first time, faced the possibility that this small Frankish force might not only survive, but triumph. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The dust, the blood, the cries of the wounded filled the air, and somewhere in the chaos, destiny prepared to deliver its final blow. As the sun sank lower, painting the battlefield in a fiery glow, the pressure on the Umayyad army grew unbearable. Their charges no longer carried the same weight. Their formations frayed as more men peeled away, anxious about the rumors of their plundered camp. And amid this growing chaos, disaster struck. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, the commander who had led his men across mountains and rivers,
don't tell me he ran away,
through victory after victory, now rode desperately among his soldiers. His curved sword gleamed as he tried to rally them. He shouted above the clash of steel, urging them to remember God, to remember their mission, to stand fast against the Franks. But leadership alone could not stem the tide. In the frenzy of combat, Abdul Rahman became a target. Accounts differ on exactly how it happened, whether he was cut down by a Frankish axe, pierced by a spear, or struck in the chaos of retreat. But what is certain is this: Abdul Rahman fell. News of his death spread like wildfire. For the Umayyad cavalry, it was as though the spine of the army had been broken. Their commander, the man who had guided them this far, was gone. Confusion turned into despair. Despair turned into rout. The Frankish soldiers sensed it immediately. With a roar, they pressed their advantage, hacking and driving the Muslims from the field. What had begun as a desperate defense now surged into a relentless pursuit. The hillside was littered with broken shields, shattered weapons, and the bodies of men and horses alike. For the Umayyads, there was no recovery. Without their leader, without order, their great host began to melt away. Riders fled in all directions, some seeking to regroup, others abandoning the field entirely. The once mighty army that had swept across Spain now dissolved before the stubborn resistance of the Franks. Charles Martel, though exhausted, did not let triumph make him reckless. He held his men together, ensuring that discipline remained even in victory. He knew that battles could be lost in the pursuit as easily as they were won in the defense. Instead of chasing blindly, he kept his army tight, claiming the field and securing the ground where so many had bled. When night finally fell, silence returned to the valley. The fires of the Umayyad camp flickered in the distance, but the army that had once threatened to carry Islam deep into Europe was no more.
Until 2025. Never mind.
Abdul Rahman lay among the dead, and his soldiers were scattered to the winds. The Franks had not only survived, they had triumphed. Against overwhelming odds, they had held the line and broken an empire's advance. The Battle of Tours was won, but its meaning was only beginning to take shape. For in the centuries to come, this single clash would be remembered not just as a victory, but as the turning point where Europe's destiny shifted forever. When dawn broke the next morning, the battlefield lay silent. The Frankish dead were mourned, but the field itself was theirs. The Umayyads, once feared as unstoppable, had vanished into the night. What remained was not only the wreckage of war, shattered weapons, broken shields, the lifeless bodies of men and horses, but also the sense that something monumental had taken place. Charles Martel did not pursue recklessly. He secured his ground, gathered his weary men, and held the field as proof of victory. The body of Abdul Rahman was found among the fallen, and with his death, the Umayyad advance into Europe came to an end. They would never again push so far north.
Nice.
In the immediate years that followed, raids would still threaten the frontiers, but never with the same scale or ambition. The Battle of Tours marked the high water mark of Muslim expansion into Western Europe.
That's so cool how the world is his, I don't know what you want to call it, tunic, shirt. That's cool. That's very well done.
For the Franks and for Christendom, it was nothing less than a turning point. Historians would later argue about the scale of the threat, about whether the Umayyads truly sought to conquer all of Europe or merely plunder its wealth.
Oh no,
But for contemporaries, for those who had fought and bled on that hillside, there was no doubt. They believed they had saved their world. Charles Martel's victory earned him more than fame. It cemented his authority over the Franks and laid the foundation for the Carolingian dynasty. From his line would come Charlemagne, the man later crowned Emperor of the Romans, who would shape medieval Europe itself. Without Tours, that story might never have been written. The battle also became legend. Medieval chroniclers described it as the clash that saved Christendom, where a hammer struck down the crescent and preserved the cross. Whether embellished or not, the symbolism endured. To this day, Tours is remembered not only as a military triumph, but as a defense of identity, culture, and the fragile future of a continent. Looking back, the Battle of Tours was more than a fight between two armies. It was a collision of worlds, of faiths, of destinies.
Yeah.
In the clash of steel and the cries of men, Europe's path was altered. And as the centuries rolled on, that autumn day in 732 would echo as one of history's decisive hours, when a small army of Franks, led by a man called the Hammer, stood against the storm and turned it aside.
That's it. Now you remember the Hammer. I don't know. A lot of these graphics, visuals, they truly look like a game. They look like games. I mean, today's games look amazing. You know that. So it wouldn't surprise me if one of those games is like, oh, that is Warhammer. You didn't know that? Like, no, I've never really played Warhammer, but it's funny. It's the Hammer, Warhammer, you know? So, yeah. It's something else, the way it used to be. And then the following day, they all had funerals, and all the dead were buried in caskets in the ground. And then, you know, their families came and visited and, you know, said their goodbyes. And yeah, none of that happened. Back in those days, you were just left like a piece of trash. You were just left like a piece of trash. Crazy what they did. And how often a battle or war or death was like right around the corner. It was like nonstop. Today, like, you know, we have wars. Yeah, we have wars today, and they're terrible. You know, back here, you know, today, you know, a war, you lose, you know, close to millions of people because of the technology. You know, nobody has shields and arrows and bows anymore. You know, it's just, you know, don't even need. Just think of it this way. Soon there'll be robots. We'll just have robots coming, you know. No need to have a human die. Let's just send a robot with a machine gun. Send him in. Let that be our front line, you know? It's going to be crazy eventually. But, I mean, when you're in the front line, like in the upper right-hand corner here, when you're in this kind of situation, you know you're going to die. The amount of courage you have to have where your captain says, charge. And you're looking at like, okay, I'm going to charge. And maybe I'll kill one person, but I'm dead. I'm going to be dead. You know you're going to be dead. But hell, they're like, nope, let's do it. Let's go. Let's fight for our country. Let's fight for our land. Let's fight for our families. You know, back then people fought for what they believed in. Today we're just owned. The governments just own us. They do whatever they want. We are their slaves. You know. You think these people back in these days were working and paying taxes in 732 AD? They're like, oh, got to pay somebody money because, you know, after all, somebody must own this planet. The land that I'm on, I guess it's not God's or the planet. It's somebody who owns it, so I got to pay to be here. Back then, try collecting. Go ahead. Come try to collect property tax. Go ahead. I'll show you what I'll do to you. I mean, they knew. But today, it's a whole different world today. It's a whole different world. But it still blows my mind. The courage of man, you know, the rebellion in I mean, you fought for what you wanted, man. No one told you otherwise. You were willing to die. You were willing to die. No question. No questions asked. Yes, I'm fighting for Europe. Let's go. I'm fighting for my religion. Let's go. 40,000 versus 10,000. Let's go. I don't care. I'll tell you, it's not like that no more today. Different attitude. Just people as a whole. Just different attitude. Crazy though. Really interesting stuff. Shows you the power of organization. And just the understanding that, all right, you have the advantage. What am I gonna do to make this even? I wouldn't know what the hell to do. I've seen 40,000 people on horses. I said, we need to get the hell out of here. We got a problem. You see what's coming? Let's get the hell out of here. Excuse me? You want us to just stand here on the hill and wait? Okay. Think about that. All right. Anyway. Great video. The clash that changed Europe forever. And the subtitles weren't too bad. I was checking more or less a little bit. I do, I'm able to read a little bit of French, and it wasn't horribly, it seemed pretty good. So those who were lost with English, you should be able to, the French subs that we have, many of, should have been able to understand that, no problem. Take care. Peace out. À la prochaine. Good night.